the U.S. Internet Task Force, what are we? Well, back in 1998, when I was a Radcliffe police officer, I started out doing this business. It was basically out of a flaw in the system. Back in the late 90s, the FBI and the National White Collar Crime Center and a lot of the other three-letter agencies that enforced cybercrime really was an absent of a means to be able to handle the low-end crime that we considered auction fraud. If you would think of eBay, a lot of the eBay fraud was going on back in the late 90s. You would buy something on eBay from a guy in the West Coast and he would never ship it, and you live on the East Coast. Well, if the dollar amount was below a level that was not investigated by the Bureau or by other agencies, they wouldn't take the case, and most times you'd be out of your money. So a patrol partner, a friend of mine, he and I decided that there was a void here in this type of enforcement, this type of crime enforcement. So what we decided to do was join an organization that was trying to accomplish this online. So we got online and we joined this little private organization, and they seemed to be pretty good. What they would do is they were made up of volunteers all over the place, and they were not law enforcement in most cases. So a lot of the referrals that we did were more or less, they went nowheres. They were pretty much just referrals that we would make, and somebody would respond to the victim and say, well, this is how you protect yourself in the future. Sorry about your luck this time. So that was unacceptable to us. And we sought out to start a new organization that was law enforcement based, membership based, but it had some teeth. So we put our heads together and we thought, how can we do that? So being a veteran police officer and having the IT background, I decided, well, let's just form this organization and really tie technology into law enforcement and see what we can do. And then the Internet Task Force was born. We had our initial board members. There were 4 initial board members for the task force. We applied for a 501c3 nonprofit status, and we were granted our exemption, and hence we became. We had our first meeting. I think Senator Tory came out, and she read from the minutes, and from there we went on to do a lot of crime referral business. So we started soliciting law enforcement officers from all over the country to join. Well, it was shy of spam email. That really wasn't the way to do it, and I just decided I really don't want to spam agencies to get members. So anytime we came up with a crime, let's say we had a victim here in Hardin County, and we had maybe an offender that lived in Miami. Well, we would call down to Miami and say, can I talk to one of your detectives? And we would recruit them to join, and it's all free for the law enforcement. Now we have a connection there. We've got a dot here and a dot there, and we've got a connection now. So as officers became connected to our organization through referrals, we grow. And to date, the USICT has over 50,000 police officer members in our organization nationwide and all over the world. We have Interpol members in our organization, RCMP, Canadian police members in our organization, and that comprises the task force. So now when we make a referral, before we would make our referral and we would just kind of hope that something would happen. Well, now with the new laws and the new organizational structure that the IFCC, the Internet Fraud Complaint Center, they are now able to take crimes and enforce them better than they ever were before. So our referral network has kind of dwindled a little bit in the way of referral because other agencies are starting to become better educated about the ability to enforce these kinds of crimes. So we did a lot of that referral initially. So how that worked, basically we would make a referral to that agency and we would say, can you take this case? And they'd say, well, I know that guy Joe. He was writing bad checks last week. Now he's on eBay. Oh, we'll take care of that. So they'd go and bring him into court, charge him on a local crime, get him before a judge, and they'd make him pay a restitution back to the victim in another state. So that was getting real dollars back to the victims of real crimes. And that worked great until about 2000, 2001 roughly. Shortly after 9/11, we saw a decline in the amount of crime referrals that we were doing online and started to focus more on child advocacy and keeping kids safe online. So we started to educate a little bit about that, about the dangers of being online, predators that are out there trying to pick children up. And so we started watching chat groups, Yahoo chat groups, MSN chat groups, and those kinds of things. So we became very active. We had formed another layer of the task force, which was to create associate members. These are non-law enforcement members. Well, these would be our watchdogs. These would be our eyes and ears on the internet, because all these officers had cases they were working. You know, they got very little time off from work, and when they did have it, they didn't want to spend it in front of a computer. But the people can help us. So we provided some specialized training for civilian-based members to join, and they would go out into these chat groups and observe. And they had specific instructions, specific training, and they would report to our National Intelligence Center, and in that particular group, we had an on-call rotational basis, and they would refer the chat violations to Microsoft, and then Microsoft would shut down the chat rooms and flag and do their own investigation, and we washed our hands of it. And that worked great. We shut down 250,000 chat rooms and child pornography related rooms in that year, say from about 2001 to about 2006. So we did a lot of work there. Chat groups kind of went away as instant messaging and texting came about, and then email got a little bit better, and so online games came into play, and there were children that were playing online games and chatting in there, and that became a little bit of a problem. So again, we all sit down at our board meeting and we said, what can we do? We're starting to fall behind again. So we decided to move our step into education and awareness, and we really wanted to focus there and do some child recovery and help with forensics. Myself, having been trained by the state of Kentucky as a forensic investigator, I actually provide forensic assistance to agencies all over the state now. And in concurrent House and Senate resolutions, we were recognized on the floor here in Kentucky as a government assist agency. So we do help provide forensics as requested. And we did that very same thing in Maysville, Kentucky, and recovered a couple of missing teens by providing technical support and brought those girls back home. So real work from real people doing real jobs out here in IT in law enforcement. So that's how we got started. And basically, I do this part-time. I do this on my own time. And when I'm not doing that and I'm not working as a policeman, I work for the Department of the Army. So next slide, please. Okay, some of the things that I want to talk about today I think are really hot topics for most of us here. And that is our children on the internet. And I think it's a very important thing that we talk about just some of these issues. I know some have to leave, and I want to try to keep it as tight on time as I can. But I'll have some time to stay later and answer some questions if you want. But as we go, if you do have a question, just raise your hand. Small enough crowd, I can address it quickly enough. So 1 in 3 parents, that's 30%, are not concerned about their children's safety when they're online. Well, that's certainly not the 30% in here, because all of you wouldn't be here if you weren't concerned. But unfortunately, that happens to be a cold fact. How many people do we know that'll put their child in the computer and then go off and do whatever? How many of you have computers in the home with your children? How many have that computer in their bedroom? Or have them have a laptop they allow to take to their bedroom alone, or wherever they're at alone in the home? Okay, well, that's the electronic babysitter, and sometimes that's a problem, because if they can go off and be alone in their bedrooms or in another room where they've got the internet connected, then you can't actively monitor that, and you can't be a part of that experience for your child. As they get older, you're going to see that they're going to gain more independence, but when they're young, they really don't need to be off into the bedroom doing that. 1 in 5 or 20% say they don't know any of the internet codes or passwords or handles or email addresses of their children. Okay, you got to know these things. Until they turn 18 in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, then they're still a minor, and that means they're still under your rule. Okay, they have no rights unless you give it to them. Okay, so if mom and dad wants to get on their computer and surf the email, just as we all know our government email is not secure, it's subject to being inspected at any time. Your child has no reasonable expectation of privacy of their email. So now, is that to mean you're going to say, hey, Sally, give me your computer, I'm going to check your email? You want to try to do it a little bit tenderly. You want to do it in such a way that it's not that I'm snooping. I want to make sure that you're safe, and I want to look at it with you so that if you have any questions, or if I see something, maybe I'll ask you about it, and you're not in any trouble. And that's the most important thing, is to reinforce your child you're not in any trouble. Because most children, when they stumble on something on the internet, they do it by accident. They don't necessarily go on purpose. There's a funny little, the acronyms, they do the texting, LOL and all that stuff. So parents have been asked, and most of them don't know what that means. They don't have any idea what some of those texting acronyms mean. And I think Verizon, or one of those cellular commercials, did a funny commercial about the mom sitting there with the little girl, and she's asking her, LOL, OMG, it's my BFF, and the mom's, so obviously that's one of the big things. So get to know what they're saying, and they can usually blast that out really quick, like POTS, parent over the shoulder, and then they'll switch screens real quick. So that's something you kind of watch out for. If they're flipping screens really fast, or when you walk in the room and all of a sudden they're playing that old boring solitaire game, you're like, oh yeah, right, okay, that's not happening. So we have to provide rules that govern our children's use on the internet, okay, and we have to enforce those rules, because if they're not consistent, and then you're sending a very mixed message to your child. So what I did in my home up to recently is I would have internet in the house, but I would say absolutely under no circumstances between this time and this time will you have internet use. Well, laptops and iPhones and Blackberries and everything, with Wi-Fi this and Wi-Fi that, and my TV's connected to the internet, and now my toaster is, and well, how do I know when my kid's on the internet? Well, it's simple, because if they don't have this, they don't get online. And that's just one tool, and I'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute. But you want to make sure you have rules and you lay it out. You might even sign a little parent-child contract that says, hey, if you're going to be online, then these are the rules. You make them sign a contract. So by their little signature, it's not, of course, legally binding, but it is between parent and child, right? So you say, hey, look, you signed this. You said you wouldn't be on the computer at 11 o'clock at night. Guess what? You got to give your computer to me now. You lost it for a week. You signed the contract. Well, what is this doing? It's teaching your child in more ways than one being ready for society too, because if they're signing a contract and they get that, then as they grow, they'll understand the seriousness of a contract. So as they're kind of growing into these things in life that are just matter of facts of life, then as they start doing that, they'll understand that, hey, because it says I really need to kind of toe that line. And remember that you create all the rules. This is your home, this is your internet connection, you write the check, you pay the bill, okay? You bought the computer, it's yours, okay? They just are stewards of that property, okay? So you have to set your rules and enforce it. I think I have a note here. Child may forget or rebel against the parent's rules. Well, that doesn't happen. Never happens in my home. Next slide. Okay. I don't think I've ever known a child to talk to anybody they've never met before. 54% have instant messaged a stranger. And these stats are, I think, a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years old, because the Department of Justice stats haven't been released yet for the last couple of years. So, but anyways, these stats are pretty serious. I mean, that's over half. That means, if I've got 2 children, one of them has. They've sent somebody a message. I have a 12-year-old daughter who has got a crush on a star and has found that star's web page, or their Facebook page rather, and has posted on the message board. What are you doing? So I of course find these things out because I look and I ask. But they do text and they do talk. Emailing a stranger, I don't think I've had that happen because I set up the email account for them, and if you've got children under 15, 16 years old, you probably have set the email account up for them. One thing that I do like is the school systems in Hardin County and in this particular county, the children all have an email account, usually with the school district. And they can use that email account, okay? And I think there's webmail and some of them they can get online and check it, but that's all filtered through the county school system. So I would, if you want to give them a Google or a Yahoo email account, that's fine, but you need to be the one to set it up, because when you're setting it up as a minor, oftentimes, because if you flag the account properly and you do it right and you say the child is under 18, it's going to require parental verification, a credit card number, something to prove mom and dad's behind a keyboard making the account. You can lie and make these things up. Kids do it all the time. Okay, and there's no way for these free email systems to verify that. They just don't have that ability. But there are ways to give your child a safe way to surf and be online, and that's by setting up a true minor profile. Okay,